I found myself looking at her and a thought of reality, the only to be a fantasy. I find myself looking at her pictures. The reality was that I was on Instagram, no Facebook, social media, because the reality was I didn't have the courage to face her. Yet I had the courage to find her pictures. I had the courage to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Then I decided to write. What's good, Life and Poetry fam? Let's talk poetry. In the previous video, we talked about writing tips to help you become an effective writer. And I said that we would continue this series on for the rest of the tips, 5 at a time. So I pray you got something out of the first video. I pray that you are starting to apply the first 5 tips that I gave you guys. And let's jump in to the next 5, right? So like I said, the first video was the first 5 tips, right? The first 5 tips was, again, I'm gonna keep looking over to this way. I got it written down. I don't wanna miss nothing. I wanna make sure that it's right, the same order I gave it to you the first time. And so that we can keep going with effectiveness, and so that it can be uniform. I don't wanna miss nothing. I like stuff being ordered, so we're gonna keep it that way. So yes, the first tip was read lots of poetry, right? Got that? Tip number 2, write as often as you can. Correction, first tip was, this was the first, okay, it was poetry that I got there, but it was for all types of writing. So this can be applied anywhere. First tip, read lots of work. Second tip, write as often as you can. Tip number 3 was designate a specific notebook, journal, binder, whatever it may be, keep everything in one place. Tip number 4, try writing in different forms. No matter what it is, try it, it's effective. Tip number 5 was use imagery, right? So those are your first 5 tips. So let's jump into the next 5 tips. I know the first video, I did it in Spanish. We're gonna stop there. I'm not bilingual. I've taken those classes, but we aren't going back there, all right? Long story for another day. So the next tips, right? So tip number 6 for series 2. Tip 6, series part 2, right? Tip number 6 was, or is, I should say, I need to be able to see. Tip number 6 is be able to embrace metaphors and stay away from cliches. A lot of times in certain works, I know specifically, I speak for poetry specifically, I'm the poet, so I speak in poetry. Metaphors can be used in a wide array of things, but if used inappropriately, it can throw off the flow of your work. You know, you can use metaphors in describing things or trying to appeal in certain ways. But you want to stay away from those cliche statements, you know, those things that are basically, it's easier said in my head than to explain to you guys, but just stick with me. We're gonna go through, we're gonna get through it. But you want to stick away from those cliches, those things that are used so common that they're just like, they aren't as effective, you know, as those things that you can create on your own, I would say. Because for me, a cliche is that thing that, you know, just, it was said once, it's said again, you know, but be creative in how you assemble your words to create these metaphors and these things that paint those pictures. Again, it goes back to one of the previous steps with imagery. You can use metaphors to describe those things, to portray the thing you want your reader or your audience to see. So tip number 7. You can sign up for writing workshops. At workshops, you have people who teach these things, who are trained in these ways, and you can even get different perspectives and ideas at workshops. You have the forum to bounce ideas off of other people instead of you just looking at your wall or in your free time just thinking to yourself. It really is helpful to be in those workshops because they also teach you how to to write formal. I know you may be thinking, okay, I'm a fiction writer. Why do I need to know about writing formally, or how to properly align things? Well, writing formally can help you with a lot of things. When you get the formal writing down, You can flip that into whatever you choose. You can take a formal standpoint and say, okay, I'm gonna take this block here, and I'm gonna just move it around here. So it's positioned how you want it verbally. You have proper parts of speech, proper transitional words, all these things here, and you can use them to your advantage, even in your fiction writing. I knew for me, um, I never liked to write formally until I learned how effective it can be for me, because I didn't know how to truly write. You know, I could spell, I could read, I can write, take the pen, paper, take a pen, put it to paper, but to actually make it make sense. A lot of times we think that fiction isn't supposed to make sense, but what I've learned in poetry, or at least in my poetry, even in my fiction, there's still a piece of formality. There's a piece of my reality in it. And even as a poet, I had to learn to write a formal poem first. I had to learn the basics of poetry before I can go and to apply my own idealism into my own fingerprint, my own style into my poetry. I had to first learn the basics of, okay, what a poem is, how to properly structure a poem, what is a stanza, how long should a stanza be, how long should a phrase be in a poem, should it be a rhyme scheme, so on and so forth. So those writing workshops do help with that there. And there are writing workshops all around you. If you're looking for one, I found that Facebook is a good forum to find different writers. Tumblr is a good forum to find different writers. If you are the app person, the person who doesn't like to sit in a classroom or sit by people, check out your social media platforms. You have Instagram poets or Instagram writers who actually help with that and actually will take time with you to say, okay, let's bounce ideas off each other. I know me specifically or personally, I've networked with a few poets on Instagram who found me through hashtags. I like to, when I post my work, I'll put a hashtag that link itself to a certain groups of people who also use those hashtags, so we can say, okay, look, we're on the same playing field. Let's figure something out. So let's work with each other here to help each other out. Workshops come in handy. All right. Tip number 8, learn to expand your vocabulary. It's okay to use basic words. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with the likes, the ises, the that's, the thes, the maybes. But when you learn to expand your vocabulary, you can learn to use different words in place of the like, in place of the is, in place of the who. You can use words that that can catch people off guard. You know, like for example, I learned that I could take a word like, for example, masturbation, right? In one of my poems I wrote a couple years ago, I took the word masturbation and I expounded on that word by tapping into going from masturbation to intercourse to sexuality, and so on and so forth. This is an example of what I did. I'm not saying you have to use those words specifically, but they worked for me in the poem that I wrote, and I was able to expound on one word by using other words to create this picture with my vocabulary. And I even threw some big words out there. I call them SAT words. I always say a big word is an SAT word because we don't normally use certain words in our everyday life, our everyday language. But as a writer, you use to learn words to your advantage. So if you don't know, if you're tired of using your basic words, open up your dictionary, learn some words, and you can learn to actually apply them to certain things, to certain situations in your writing. I know that vocabulary was one of the things as a writer I had to tap into, especially as a poet, because certain words just got tiring. To keep using the same words, the same phrases, I had to learn to expand it in a way of saying, okay, wait, this word means the same thing, but let's find the synonym for this word here to use in place of this word. Let's okay, so that word still fits. Okay, let's find another word and let's keep rotating them out. Let's keep rotating them out to see which one fits better for what I'm trying to convey in this piece of work. And yeah, I'm still in the process of learning different words as I go. I try to add at least 2 new words to my vocabulary daily, so that I can say, okay, let me play around with this word, see how I can put this into a new poem in my free write time. Sometimes they end up in some of my pieces that are completions. Sometimes they don't. They just end up on my eraser board and basically left at the wayside. Not gonna lie, I don't always use the new words, but they do come in handy when you can learn to expand your vocabulary and expand to the point where you can use words to just say, look, I'm giving you this picture here, but I'm not going to paint it with color. I want to paint it with words. I want you to follow the words. I want you to follow how the phrases come across. I want you to follow how the parts of speech are in play. I want you to follow these transitions with certain words, and it is effective. Trust me, even if you don't use it in your writing, it will be effective in your everyday communication with a person. Learn how to use your words, people. Words are power. Words have weight, and they will hurt, they will uplift, they can encourage, they can destroy, they can do a lot of things. Vocabulary is a crucial part in your writing. Expand it, trust me, you won't regret expanding your vocabulary. So, tip number 9. Read your work out loud over and over and over again. It gives you a chance to actually hear it for yourself from your voice, your standpoint, your point of view. Excuse me. Uncut, right? I'm hungry, but I digress. So when you can read your work out loud, for example, me as a poet, I learned to analyze my own work by actually hearing it, not just by reading it, because it's different when you read it and you can read it to yourself in your head. You can read, as your teacher would say, read to yourself, spend time reading to yourself. That's cool and all. But when you get to the point of saying, okay, look, let me actually understand what this is, what this picture is actually painting here, I learned to say, okay, look, let me hear it in a tone that I want it to be voiced in. Let me hear the transitions in my voice, the pitch, the undertone, the elevation. Let me hear it all and see if it still makes sense, right? And when you get to that point of analyzing what you actually hear, it can help in your editing process. So if you're reading your work out loud, again, me as a poet, for example, I'm writing a poem now called Suicidal. It's a touchy topic for most, but it's something that I want to get out because it's a heavy topic for me and some things that I'll touch into in another video. But the poem itself, I've only made it to 1 stanza, and the reason being is because every time I write and read it out loud, it makes no sense to me. It doesn't portray that message I want to get across about what I'm trying to say about being suicidal or what suicidal is. It doesn't give you the proper imagery. It's just a dark blob in a cloud of nothingness, in my opinion. But that's part of my analyzing process. I have to break it down piece by piece, line by line, word by word. And I can only do that by if me personally, if I hear it out loud. Some writers don't have to do it, but I encourage you to do it. When you hear it, it has a different weight than actually just reading it off a piece of paper or having someone read it to you. Read it out loud yourself, over and over and over again, till you get a feel for what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're writing, what you're hearing, and that way you can see what your audience is going to hear as well. So, on to tip number 10, the last tip for this part 2 of this series here. Join different forums, whether it be a poetry forum or just a writing forum overall, and encourage yourself to join not only the forum but join the group, and just like so you can dive into with others. Like I said previously with the workshops, when you have that group of people around you who can give you the feedback in real time, it plays a big difference than waiting for someone to get back to you. Then once they get back to you, you lost that thought process and you lost that stride that you had thus far in your writing and your work. that group, whether it be in person or online. If you don't like people like myself, I encourage you to find a group online that can help you to grow as a writer, who can sit there and say, okay, look, these are things that you may can work on, and vice versa. You can bounce those ideas off each other. As I said, you can do in those workshops. But those online groups are a great place to find writers like you, writers who have either the same understanding or perspective on the genre in which you're writing, or those who have the different opinion on it, that can say, okay, look, help me learn this here, and vice versa. But those things all come into play, guys. They all do. And yeah, so that concludes to tips 6 through 10 for writing tips series part 2, dose, right? So again, I encourage you guys to write. If you aren't writers, try writing. If you are writers, continue writing. If you stop writing, pick the pen back up. If you don't like the pen, pick your pencil up. If you don't do pencils or pen, pick up your phone, your tablet, whatever it is. Even if you just write it in your head as you're walking down the street, do so. It's helpful, and it's a great stress reliever, believe it or not, as well, to get that thought on paper. And believe it or not, that creativity will go a long way. It will go a long way. Yes, but I encourage you guys, if these tips are helpful to you in any way, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Like this video. If you have not already done so, please subscribe and share these videos. I just broke recently, I broke 30 subscribers or family members who have joined the Life in Poetry family. I thank you so much. I know it may not be a big number to some, but for me, that is a blessing. It's a lot, and it's a step in the right direction. I'm going to keep these videos going. I'm going to keep the writing series going. We have a few more tips to get through. Again, I'm going to keep breaking them down 5 tips at a time. I don't want to bombard you with too much, but I do encourage you, please, please, if you like these videos, please feel free to reach out to me. And I will leave these tips in the description box below, along with my email address. If you want to email me about anything, to talk about anything, you can also inbox me on Facebook, or find me on, inbox me here on YouTube if you are able to. If you want to reach me on Instagram, my link will be in the description below. My blog link also in the description below. My book entitled Love in the Eye of the Author will be in the description below. Guys, if you cannot tell, I am a writer who loves to write. I love poetry. I'm fond of it. I find it to be a blessing to be able to put words on paper and make them make sense. But again, guys, thank you for joining me today for your word tips, for your writing tips of the week, series part 2. Be blessed. Be blessed, New Life. Be blessed, Life and Poetry family. New Life is the name of my church. I'm thinking about them. I can assume they're thinking about me. That's why the name came up. But be blessed, be encouraged, and no matter what, continue to write. Until next time, Life and Poetry family, we out.